So I promise I won't move too much, but I do tend to move about a bit when I'm speaking. I'll do a really, really brief introduction. Quite a lot of you I know already, but for those of you that I haven't met before, as Jamie said, I'm John Vincent. I've been a librarian since I was about 3. No, I started working in libraries in 1962. That's where the joke comes from. In Hertfordshire, and then in Lambeth, and then eventually in Enfield, and now in 1997 I left Lambeth. I was made redundant, and I had a change of structure, and I was involved in creating something called the Network. And it's a network of libraries, archives, museums and galleries that work around social justice, and that's what I do now. I write, run training courses, try and support people in libraries and museums and galleries and so on around this whole area of work. I probably do actually, and then when we do the informal chatty bit and you ask me questions, I'm happy to talk about anything else that I do. What I wanted to focus on then for this evening is something around libraries of sanctuary. And I'm a bit of a kind of I ask people questions, so I hope that's all right. Don't feel I'm putting anyone on the spot. It's just when I run training courses, I always give them a warning at the beginning that I do ask lots of questions, because it's much easier to ask you what you know or don't know than it is for me to go prattling on and then find you all know it already. So this is the first of 1 or 2 questions. Who's come across cities of sanctuary as an idea in the past or now? Okay, that's fine. Right. So can my yes, thank you. There we go. So there's a website. I'll make sure that you get the link and you can actually find it yourselves. But City of Sanctuary is a movement that's formed in Sheffield, and now there are cities of sanctuary across the whole of the UK and indeed abroad. The idea is that it's a place that will offer a welcome, at the moment primarily to refugees and asylum seekers. They themselves, City of Sanctuary, don't like labelling people by their migration status, and I think they're absolutely right. So they've started to suggest that we talk about them being sanctuary seekers as opposed to refugees or asylum seekers. So having said that, I'm now going to try and refer to people as sanctuary seekers during the evening. So City of Sanctuary, the idea is that a particular town or city will become a place of welcome, and it will be somewhere where people are offered signposting to facilities they might need, or offered a welcome. Quite a lot of them organise events and activities. I'm involved very much at the moment, for example, in Birmingham with their City of Sanctuary, and they run a whole range of activities and link and kind of like the umbrella group for other groups across Birmingham. So City of Sanctuary has, and you may or may not be able to see it, has a number of what they call streams. And streams are like the different subject areas that they cover. And the streams are growing, which is really exciting. Nora and I were just talking about that a moment ago. So there are, for example, very lively universities of sanctuary. And some of you may actually have been at one or work in one currently. So there are universities of sanctuary. There are gardens of sanctuary. So kind of national gardens and similar kinds of places are offering welcome. There are arts places of sanctuary. I'm saying places because they're organisations that offer some kind of art provision. There's just been created a theatre of sanctuary, for example. The latest one, and I went to a meeting of them last Friday, is stations of sanctuary. So it's the idea that many of us do. You know, you go to a railway station, it's open long hours, but it's also somewhere where you find people in all sorts of distress. And what they're looking at is how they can best encourage and support their staff to signpost people to relevant places. You know, a bit like we do in libraries. We have people arriving in a library in distress, One of the things that we're very skilled at is signposting people in the right direction. So there's a number of streams, and the stream I want to concentrate on today is libraries of sanctuary. So at this very moment, there is one library of sanctuary in the UK, and it's I wish they'd chosen one with a different name, so I always get my tongue tied. So it's Thimble Mill Library in Sandwell in the West Midlands, and that was accredited as a library of sanctuary in 2017. What happens with any of those streams is that, and we'll take the Thimble Mill one as an example, working with local refugee organisations and the local City of Sanctuary, and also Birmingham City of Sanctuary, they put in a bid to become a library of sanctuary, and the local groups then assessed the bid and accredited them. So the assessment covers things like, are sanctuary seekers involved in decision making? How do you decide which services you're going to provide? Are they helping you inform what you're doing? Are staff trained? Is sanctuary seeking a big part of the whole of the library's ethos in terms of what they're doing? As I say, Thimble Mill was and is the first one, but there's a handful, a growing handful, of other library services that are getting ready. And what I wanted to do very briefly, and then I'd like to kind of throw it over to you, is just describe what's happening right at the moment, and then we can talk about that more widely. So, right at the moment, Thimble Mill got its accreditation. It had built quite a lot on a project called Welcome to Your Library, and I'm just interested, does anybody remember? Oh, yeah. Good, thank you. So Welcome to Your Library was a project that ran from, and I always have to look this up, 2003 to 2007. And it linked public libraries across the UK who were working with new arrivals fairly broadly. So sanctuary seekers, but also people who were here as workers from abroad. Sadly, positively, it got funding from the Paul Hamlin Foundation. But sadly, once the project ended, the funding ended too. Some of those libraries who were involved managed to mainstream the work they were doing, but quite a lot didn't. So we went through a period where around 2007 there was a huge amount happening. It kind of dipped away, but some library services clung on and did things, and Sandwell was one of those. Since they got their recognition into 2017, Sandwell have been working with all the other library services in the West Midlands, so Birmingham, Coventry and so on, to look at how, as a region, they could actually develop libraries of sanctuary. They haven't got there yet because it's actually quite a long process. There's a lot of work we need to do. But what they did decide was that last year, for the first time, every single library service in the West Midlands, public library service in the West Midlands, celebrated Refugee Week in June and did something, which doesn't sound that much, but given the current climate and given that it was a coordinated effort, it's actually fairly terrific. The West Midlands Libraries Connected, and sorry, I don't know how to say this. Interrupt me if I start babbling about things that don't make any sense. So do people know what Libraries Connected is?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, don't, please don't, no, good, thank you, I need one of those. So Libraries Connect, it used to be called Society of Chief Librarians. It's the umbrella group for heads of library services. I'm going to try and do this with a straight face. It received funding from the Arts Council, and therefore also changed its focus somewhat and has become Libraries Connected. There's a central organisation that promotes and develops library things, but there are also regional branches of Libraries Connected. So, for example, there's a Libraries Connected London. There's a Libraries Connected West Midlands. And it's through Libraries Connected West Midlands that the group of libraries decided to work together. What we also decided as a group, and they invited me because I was involved in Welcome to Library to see if I would be part of their group. So although I live in Devon, nowhere near the West Midlands, I do go most weeks to do something in Birmingham. They invited me to be part of the group, and what we decided to do was to write a resource pack that would be a guide to public libraries that are interested in becoming libraries of sanctuary, with loads and loads of good practice, examples from other library services, the kinds of things to look out for, lots of case studies and lots of not kind of bossy instructions, but sort of suggestions of things that, why not try this, how about that? And I know some of you have contributed case studies and examples to that pack, which is terrific. It's due out, we hope, at the beginning of March. Excuse me. It got slightly delayed, and if I'm feeling wicked later on, I might tell you why I've got something to do with it. I won't do that now. The idea is that it'll be published. It's being published, being funded and supported jointly by City of Sanctuary and by the Arts Council and by Libraries Connected, and will be published, as I say, hopefully in March. And we're going to have a launch of it at just before Refugee Week, so kind of very early June. Again, the idea is that once the pack is there, and once we know that we've got the support from Libraries Connected and the Arts Council, we will then make sure that all those libraries that are in the pipeline get support to put their applications in. So I know there are libraries all over the country who are thinking, or beyond thinking, they've actually got their applications ready, and we're just hoping that once the pack's complete and people can kind of tidy up anything they need to do, they can then move into the accreditation phase, which will be getting local City of Sanctuary groups and maybe some outside people to assess what they're doing. Does that make sense so far? Mm-hmm. Okay, right, I'm not going on too much longer. What did I want to cover? I'm working with Birmingham public libraries because I've been working with them on and off doing other training work for the last 3 years or so, and they've invited me to come and do some training to support all their staff moving towards the libraries in Birmingham becoming libraries of sanctuary. I'm also working on a very specific project with them, which is, I think, fascinating. A member of staff, a library assistant in their children's and music library, was really interested in whether music could be a vehicle for attracting refugees who've never been to a library and other sanctuary seekers, attracting them to a library and engaging them. So we're doing a kind of experimental project where we're working with some local sanctuary seeking groups, and we're looking at different ways. So maybe it'll involve performances to start with, and then engaging sanctuary seekers themselves in singing, playing instruments, whatever it takes to engage them. We've got great enthusiasm, so all the refugee groups that we've spoken to and all the support organisations we've spoken to, it's terrific. So we just need to pull it together now, which is quite a big thing to organise, but it's going to happen after April, we're fairly sure. The thing that we'll probably do as an introduction, what I should have said right at the start, is that at the moment it's only public libraries, but and we haven't got, the West Midlands Libraries Connected and I haven't got the capacity at the moment to turn it into other kinds of libraries as well. But there's absolutely no reason why all sorts of libraries couldn't become part of this movement. And I'm hoping that once the pack's published and once things get going, we'll be able to widen it out, or they'll be able to widen it out, and all sorts of other libraries can get involved. I was saying to Molly when we were just talking beforehand, I think one of the other interesting things is that there's also growing interest that we look at libraries not just being somewhere for sanctuary seekers, but being sanctuaries altogether. Mm-hmm. And we build on that strong role that libraries have as being somewhere that's recognised as a a good signpost in place, somewhere where you go when you're in trouble, and they will help you find somewhere locally to go to, all those kind of things. And if we're doing our jobs right, also somewhere that people will feel safe and respected, and that we will provide a safe space for people to be in. And so I think once the Libraries of Sanctuary bit has moved into really happening, there will be a move, I think, to look at whether we can look at other kinds of sanctuary. I'm personally really interested in that. Again, I've shared this with Molly. Part of my own background was having been, when I was at school, I was very badly bullied. And the library was actually somewhere that gave me immense support, the school library. I've been forever grateful to my school librarian come English teacher, who never said a word, but clearly knew what was going on, and took me out of school lunch times, which was my bad period when I was being bullied, and gave me a job helping in the school library, excuse me, every lunchtime. And that kind of idea of the library being somewhere that I felt safe in is something that I kind of like to see grow for all of us and what we're offering. Right, sorry, that's probably more than enough. So, over to you. Questions, comments? Have I worn you out?
What's the application process for public library service to be one?
Okay, so the application process is basically that a library or a library service, it might be an individual library, it might be a library service, decides that it wants to set out to be accredited as a library sanctuary. Within the City of Sanctuary website, but it'll be more importantly in the pack we're doing, there will be a whole set of guidelines about how you apply, what you need to look at, the kinds of evidence you need to provide, and then working with local people, local sanctuary seeking groups, local support groups and so on. They will help you shape the application into something that then can be assessed. At the moment, the assessments are also being done by local groups, but I think there may be a move to involving other library people. So I won't tell you where it's from because that wouldn't be appropriate, but we've been notified that there is a library service that's put in an application very recently, and I think it's likely that people from the Library of Sanctuary PAC steering group, so like people from the Arts Council, may decide that they'd like to be involved in the assessment, at least in the early stages. It's not, what's the right way? It's straightforward, but there is a bit to do. I think other people who've are going through the process may agree or disagree, but I think it's fairly straightforward, but there is quite a lot of evidence that you need to gather.
So is it on the website at the moment, or do we have to wait for it?
The criteria that they're using is on the City of Sanctuary website, but the libraries criteria are being slightly modified as I speak. I keep kind of dancing around it. One of the dangers of writing something like a resource pack is actually having it written by a committee. So I thought it was finished when we had our steering group meeting 2 weeks ago, and then people said, wouldn't it be a good idea if page 2 became page 3? And couldn't we rewrite this bit? And so, quite rightly, we're reassessing it, but it means that it's not appeared quite as quickly as we were hoping. Sorry.
So I'm thinking from the Welcome Collection Library.
Hello, yes.
So I'm just wondering, in the libraries who are looking to join, or getting registered, are there any independent libraries, or is it all public libraries who are taking the first steps?
At the moment, it's just public libraries. But the idea will be that once the public library stream is up, when you do look at the website, you'll see that there's a mention of public libraries, but there's not a proper stream yet.
Yeah.
Once that's up and live, and we're then starting to do the whole promotion of it across libraries, archives and museums, I think there will be a great growth of interest from other kinds of libraries.
Can I just ask a subsequent?
Yeah, of course.
So Libraries Connected, which used to be the Society of Chief Librarians, is Chiara Eastell still working?
Is what?
Chiara Eastell, is that her name, who used to work for the Society of Chief
I know
Librarians?
Kira, yes.
Is she Libraries Unlimited, because Welcome had worked with her before, and I'm just wondering if she's
No,
still
she's
there.
moved on.
She's moved on. Okay, that's fine. She'll be able to look for it.
Sorry,
No
I'm
worries,
really.
it's fine. I can look it up.
No, don't worry. She used to be, and she was my local chief librarian, so to speak, living in Exeter. Alex Kitto, Kittow, is her replacement.
I work in an NHS library, and we don't have refugees as such, but we have lots of foreign workers. Would it still be relevant for us to be involved?
I think, yeah, because there'll be a welcome and the signposting, all that. I think that would be absolutely fine. Yes. Yeah. And look at what there'll be parallels from some of the public library and also some of the other streams. So if you had a quick look on the City of Sanctuary website, you'd probably find a stream that's offering something that would fit broadly with the sorts of things that you do.
We have the Home Office as well, where we're
Yes.
so it would be really relevant.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
What I was going to say at some point, and I'll come to your question in a second, was I don't know whether my email address is floating anywhere, but I'm very happy if anybody wants to follow up from today to email me. So I can give it to you, or we can make sure it goes out, whichever's easier, really. Sorry?
If anybody wanted, they email Secretary ILIG.
Okay,
I'll pass it on.
Brilliant.
With your permission.
thank you.
Anybody who's here, that's fine.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, sorry.
Just to add to that, actually, so I work for a charity and we are into reading, shared reading, and libraries are our natural allies. And what we try to address through shared reading is social isolation and social cohesion. And we have a big project in Croydon. Incidentally, yes, we do. But so, is there a role for people like us? Because it feels like we could be contributing, but obviously we can't be accredited. But libraries do signpost, or we are based in libraries, and we are actually increasing the footfall of lots of libraries because we are there.
What some of the best examples I've seen have been libraries that. No, I'll go back a stage. I think all the best examples of all the work that libraries have done is work where they've worked in partnership. And I think if you were working in a library service and were a partner, there's absolutely no reason why they and you couldn't put in an application together, and your work would be a really strong supporting part of what they're doing. Yeah.
I submitted our application in December, and we've been assessed at the moment.
Right.
And we work a lot in partnership with groups like you're talking about, and they're really instrumental in our application and very involved. And actually some of the groups will be visited during the assessment when they're in the library to discuss how, if they feel that the library is a place of sanctuary, and why and how, and what else we need to improve, and how that partnership can grow together. So, because I think what I picked up more than anything, it's not about getting accreditation. Obviously that's amazing, and that's what you want. But actually you have to commit to a 3-year plan as well, don't you? It's not that you've got it ticked done, it's about how you're going to keep that alive and true and real as well. So it's building on those.
And actually, as you mentioned with us, we've experienced that as well, where we've had funding and then the funding's gone away. Some of the libraries or other partner organisations have stepped in and they're still running, but equally there are quite a few who are like, our resources are being cut, we are under duress,
Yes.
we can't support this, we can't give you free printing anymore, or things like that. So,
But I think I completely understand. I think one of the huge benefits of becoming a library of sanctuary, or any of the streams of sanctuary, is that it gives a very public vehicle to talking and shouting about what you're doing. So certainly I know in Sandwell the councillors have just bowled over that the library service has got this, and they're kind of dining out on it still, 4 years later or 3 years later, whatever it is, because I think it's a really significant development, and it's a recognition from the community as well as from your co-workers that the library service is doing something significant.
Could you say something about libraries of sanctuary in an international context? Where if your journal had something on Greece, I'm also interested in whether other countries are doing things.
I can't really, because I know I've seen mention of work going on elsewhere, but I haven't actually seen any examples, I'm afraid. It's something that I'm going to be looking at over the next month. Sorry, I'll digress for a second. I've been commissioned, that's a bit posh, isn't it? It sounds like there might be money involved. I've been asked to write an article for a magazine I've never heard of called Alexandria. People know it? Yeah, sorry. It's not one that's in my kind of...
I've been a librarian for a very long time. I remember it.
Okay, oh right, okay, yeah. And what they want is an article about libraries of sanctuary and what's happening here, but also looking at what's going on elsewhere abroad. So I was going to do some research for that. So if I may, leave it with me and I can then let you know what I discover. Is that all right?
John,
Yeah.
I've been to what I saw as the Library of Sanctuary. That was in a township in South Africa where the community bought a field and grew beetroot. They sold the beetroot and built a library, and then the second crop bought the books. And so now this library is surrounded by fence, and they have community people at the beginning, as you go in, to make sure it's safe. And it really is a sanctuary in what's a desperate situation. So it's not probably what you're thinking of as a sanctuary, but that shows a library as a sanctuary.
Yeah.
That's Patanga Malanga in South Africa. It's near Pietermaritzburg.
Okay, no, I'll come back to you on that.
Yeah.
I was saying to Ian earlier on, I've got a friend, we've probably both got the same friend, who's now the head of libraries in Thunder Bay in Ontario. And he's looking at whether but linking to the UK, with drawing on our best practice, whether he can develop some kind of library of sanctuary that's beyond just the sanctuary seekers we've been talking about. So there's no reason why you'd know. Thunder Bay is an interesting, if somewhat depressing place in that it's got high levels of racism and it's a very divided community. But the library is becoming a safe place, particularly for local native Canadians who are seeing it as somewhere that's theirs. And so my friend wants to try and build on that to see whether he could develop a library service that is actually about sanctuary altogether, not just about the sort of refugee sanctuary seekers that we're talking about.
I think what you said about extending that, because I think if you become a library of sanctuary, you start to look at things in a different way, and you consult more, and you involve other people in that process and that consultation process, and I think it will influence how you work with whichever groups, like homeless people or whoever comes into your library. I think it's wider definitely than being a library of sanctuary for asylum seekers, refugees and migrants. It's about the whole community, but starting there, and then it influences how you start working with other marginalised groups or other groups that you want to connect with.
I completely agree. I mean, I think one of the things that we've learnt, certainly in the however many years it is that I've been involved in libraries, is that we keep trying to separate things into boxes. So we do this bit of work here and that bit of work. It doesn't really work like that. There are such strong interconnections between all the different kinds of library work we're doing. So just as an example, yes, I'm working around supporting sanctuary seekers, and I'm doing the music work, but I'm also currently, and this is another, well, this has such long titles, I'm currently the co-chair of the CILIP LGBTQ plus network steering group. Yeah, I've got it in the right order this time. And what we're looking at is, again, that whole idea of libraries being somewhere that provides a welcome, and we can begin to connect the different things up, I think. And one of my personal interests is, and I'm going to try and get this, I've never talked about this before, so I'm going to try and describe it. I'm really interested in working with men who feel very much that systems around them can't accommodate them. Men who are vulnerable, for example. So I know two men very well at the moment who are both feeling really vulnerable and are finding the kind of usual library settings quite hard to work in. And I think when we talk about sanctuary, we need to be thinking about breaking down a lot of those barriers and thinking about different kinds of people who might work with us and who would use us. And I think Nora's absolutely right. I think it starts to bring all that together. Yes.
I seem to remember seeing somewhere some years ago public libraries being described as places of safety. But I then discovered that there was no check, as far as I could find out, on the people who staffed the library as to whether they were, I can't remember what the terminology is now, where they had to check that they were people who did not, were suitable people to deal with children. And I'm particularly concerned nowadays with a lot of community libraries that the people are not checked, and if they don't have to be checked. But the other point is that doing the checks costs an awful lot of money, so it's a terrible situation.
I don't even think how long it is. 30 years or something since I've actually managed a library, so I'm going to talk a bit vaguely, but those of you that actually work in libraries can then leap in, I hope. My understanding is that most public libraries will have people who are working with vulnerable users. DBS checked is what it is at the moment. But it may not be every single member of staff.
Yes. If somebody comes into the library when one of the DBS checked people isn't there, is it a safe place for you to be?
I can only talk theoretically. The theory is that there would always be DBS checked people on duty.
In practice, I don't think that's happening.
No, but I can't get into that because I just don't know the answer anymore. Because it's not something I've ever dealt with, I'm afraid.
I work for Public Library Service, and in Slough we're all DBS checked.
Yes.
Library staff, but I don't think that's the case across the country.
And I'm not sure at all about community-run libraries, whether that would be
And community-run libraries is something quite new.
Yes. Yes.
Especially when the volunteers.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Yes.
You can't be sure of anything.
Yeah.
Sort of following on from that, we're very aware that lots of public libraries are taking on or being asked to take on various roles to do with various authorities in the community, maybe merging with other functions. And I wondered how far that was compatible with being a library of sanctuary, or whether there was a potential clash.
I can only answer that person. I haven't seen any where I think there would be a clash. Certainly the best libraries that have taken on other functions, the one that always sticks in my mind is a terrific library I went to in Salford, where it was sounds rather odd, but it's a huge library with the library downstairs and a GP's practice upstairs. And the library staff were the desk staff were the front of house staff both for the library and for the GP's practice. And all the feedback was that it worked perfectly, because you've got people coming in to see a nurse but had never been to the library before, and so it gave the counter staff a chance to actually start showing them what the library offered. I wouldn't have thought, unless...
I suppose I'm thinking the Home Office and other such functions.
Of which, sorry?
The Home Office, for example.
Yeah, there are I'm not going. Sorry, I won't get down that road. There are some issues around the Home Office, in all sorts of ways. And their role with libraries, but generally, I think the relationship with other organisations that come into libraries and use their facilities works pretty well. The only time when I could see it might not would be if you'd got let's say another part of your council which was really, really stressful. And the one that strikes me is something around housing. So if you've got a housing office in a library where there are people clamouring for somewhere to live, it would create quite a hard atmosphere for somebody who's seeking sanctuary to be in. But that's the only example I could think of, I'm afraid. Go on.
Well, just that will give safety for a little bit, but also can build to the side a bit. I was wondering if you could give us some practical examples from the law did to feel people safe to get that accommodation.
So what? Sorry, I didn't catch it.
I was wondering if you could give us some practical examples of what Informal did to get that
Oh,
accommodation.
yeah, sure, yeah. So it's not really. I'll happily do it, but it's not going to sound like rocket science. It's actually those.
Just have a more general idea of what needs to get.
Okay, so what they ensured was that the library was welcoming. So it had welcome posters in different languages. The staff knew and were trained to greet people, not in the. Sorry, it's a private joke coming. I'll explain it. Not in the kind of good morning sir, good morning madam way, which I know some libraries still do. It makes me wince with my LGBTQ plus hat on. But welcoming people, making the library look welcoming, making sure that somebody arriving at the library is greeted and dealt with appropriately and isn't just left wandering. Making sure that all the library staff know where to signpost people to locally. Getting library staff trained. Working with local sanctuary seekers to check everything they do. Is this going to offer you a welcome? Is this the kind of activity that you think would fit in with the sorts of things you want? What I could do, if it would help, was that for the stations meeting I went to, I've just, what's the right word? It's getting late, that's what it is. I can't think of the word now. I've just I've cut and pasted, that will do. Cut and pasted a bit from the thimble mill description about what they do and what they offer. If I could, I'll happily send it to you, because it's not confidential or anything. It just gives you a really real life picture of the sort of thing that a library does and what it can offer. They make sure that all of their events have something that appeals to sanctuary seekers, and some of them may be events that are open to anybody, some of them may be targeted events, but making sure that sanctuary seekers are welcome. Taking a completely different library service, if you look at somewhere like Norfolk, which has a huge emphasis on health, what they also do is make sure that the activities that they run in many of their libraries are very welcoming to sanctuary seekers too. So they'll do, just an example, they do, some of the libraries run regular healthy eating lunches where you can go and actually learn a bit about cooking healthy food, maybe share a healthy lunch with people, and they make sure that any sanctuary seekers also get involved in that kind of thing. The stations meeting that I'm going to next, I think it might be the last one, is actually going to be in Bolton Library, and Bolton work with a sanctuary seekers cooking group who offer lunches in the library as part of a general welcome. And the stations group are going to be meeting in the library with local refugees, with local people, and with the cooking group. It's not one going entirely, but you get the picture. Is that all right? How are we doing?
Well, okay, do you want to break there and everybody get a glass of wine and something to eat, and then generally meet John and talk to each other and network, because I see one or two people seem to be wanting. So I'm Ian, I was the chair before Jamie. Jamie has had to go because the last train to Wales is shortly.
Last ever?
And so it's great to be here and listen to my friend John, who's given us a good talk there, and I'm sure we'll continue. So if you want to help yourself to wine and continue and network.
Thank you.